Well, it's time for our monthly checkup of the Australian consumer. How are things tracking midway through 2025? Well, it's fair to say that it looks like the recovery that was coming through late last year has stalled a little bit in 2025. June Consumer Sentiment Survey shows an index read of 92.6 overall, up 0.5%, but still in cautiously pessimistic territory. That compares to 92.1 in May. That May survey was conducted before the RBA's May policy decision. So that decision to cut rates by another 0.25%, and also the language around that decision, which was much more confident, particularly around inflation, did go some way to providing a boost to the consumer mood, but it looks to have been partially offset by these continuing concerns around the economy. When we look at the survey detail, that theme shows through in several areas. In terms of the components of the index, there was a promising improvement in assessments of time to buy a major household item. That particular sub-index up 7.5% and nudging over the 100 line. Remember, 100 is the gain line for consumers that marks the point at which optimists outnumber pessimists. That's the first time we've had buyer sentiment in net optimistic territory in 3 and a bit years, 1,190 days, not that we're counting. And this is a clear sign that the cost of living pressures that have been bearing down heavily on Australian consumers over that period are continuing to diminish. That's both a product of the RBA rate cut, but also the stabilisation and inflation that we've seen over the last 6 months as well. And there was also a slight improvement around assessments of family finances. So the RBA rate cut, while it was widely expected, did go some way towards providing a boost to sentiment. But as I said, those concerns around the economy partially offset that small positive. And around that, we saw midway through the survey week, the March quarter national accounts release showed the economy barely grew in the quarter, only up 0.2%. That would have fed into some of those concerns. And of course, the external backdrop remains very unsettled with no resolution to the US tariff situation and still a very unsettled situation more generally. When we look at responses to separate questions around news recall, we get all of these themes through very clearly. Inflation's still the highest recalled news topic in the June quarter, but the news is being assessed as less unfavourable, progressive, still moving in the right direction. Similarly, around the news on interest rates, that was a positive this quarter for the first time in quite a while. And news on employment, all of these have been seen as less unfavourable, moving more towards the favourable side of things. In contrast, international news is becoming more prominently recalled in the data and is seen as an overwhelming negative. So it's clearly the way things are playing out for the consumer. And that looks to be weighing a little bit on expectations more generally actually softened in the month, and expectations for the labour market as well. We're coming from a very positive starting point the last 4 months, and that confidence has subsided in the latest month. Where the RBA's rate cut had a more clearly pronounced positive effect was around housing. Assessments of time to buy a dwelling rose 3.3%, nudging up to a new cycle high. They're still in pessimistic territory and well below long-run averages, but the recovery there looks to be continuing rather than stalling. And expectations for house prices stepped up another notch significantly, rising to near a 13-year high. So most consumers do expect prices to rise over the next 12 months. Likewise, they expect interest rates to move lower. About 2/3 of consumers expect mortgage rates to be lower in 12 months' time. Amongst the mortgage bout, it's about 80%. Now, the detail, as always, has lots of interesting snippets. One of the things that's starting to show through is that while the recovery overall in sentiment has lost its way a little bit, there are more pockets of outright optimism. We cover about 100 subgroups of our survey. And across those 100, about 20 are now seeing optimists outnumber pessimists. Now, some of this is due to sort of innate optimism. We find 18 to 24-year-olds typically are more positive about sentiment and the economy in general. They're amongst the most positive at the moment as well. Rough rule of thumb, historically, for every year you get older, you're about 0.5% percentage point less positive around sentiment. But there are other themes evident as well. One of the optimistic groups is also ALP supporters, very clearly off the federal election result. That's the dynamic going on there. Amongst industries, those who are employed in the finance and government sectors are optimistic rather than pessimistic. And Sydney-siders and those living in Adelaide are also slightly optimistic rather than pessimistic. So there are lots of other sub-themes in the detail of the survey, and we'll be reporting on them in due course. But the general picture here is still of a cautiously pessimistic consumer. We've come out of the deep dark hole of the cost of living crisis the last 2 or 3 years, but we're still in pessimistic territory. And where we're seeing positives that are continuing to gain traction around inflation and interest rates and so on, these are encountering more headwinds around expectations for the economy, and particularly the global backdrop. For the RBA, it really underscores what's been a bit of an underwhelming period for the consumer over the last 3 months. The data from that March quarter national accounts showing the consumer's still a bit out of sorts in terms of their spending. It's telling us that the recovery remains sluggish and a gradual one at best, and it may even be starting to stall a little bit. We'll see how that plays out through the second half of 2025. At the moment, there still looks to be a recovery in place, but it may have lost its way a little bit in the last few months.
The content of this recording is informational and of general nature only, and is not intended to constitute a research report or reflect any recommendation or financial advice. It has been prepared without taking into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs, and investment decisions should not be based on it. You should obtain your own independent advice before proceeding with any investment decision. Whilst every effort has been taken to ensure that the contents are correct and any opinions, forecasts, conclusions are reasonably held based on information at the date of recording, Westpac does not make any representation or warranty as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or information contained in this recording, and any liability therefore is expressly disclaimed to the extent permitted by law. None of the material included in this recording should be copied, published, or reproduced in whole or in part without the prior written permission of Westpac.